Hi BookTube, it's Kim at K Becker's Books, and this video is going to be a book review of Mary Doria Russell's The Sparrow. Hi, it's Kim, and I wanted to bring you a book review of a book I read for maybe mid-rash, even though it's June 15th. I know, it's late, but I still wanted to do the review because this book hit me that much. So here it is. This is called The Sparrow by Mary Doria Russell. And I'm going to put a picture here so I don't have to hold the hardcover up the whole time. The Sparrow is Mary Doria Russell's very first novel. It was published in 1996. She was born in August of 1950, so she published this book when she was 46 years old. I just wanted to give you a little bit of history on her before I tell you about the book. She has a Bachelor of Arts in Cultural Anthropology from the University of Illinois, a Master of Arts in Social Anthropology from Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, yay, New England, and a PhD in Biological Anthropology from the University of Michigan. She's a scientist. She at one point was a professor in anatomy and dentistry with a specialization in Neanderthal studies. Very smart woman, multilingual. Yeah, I'm fascinated by her background. So, The Sparrow, the novel, won the following prizes and awards. The James Tiptree Jr. Memorial Award in 1997, the John W. Campbell Award for Best New Science Fiction in 1998, the Cleveland Council for the Arts Literature Prize in 1998, the British Science Fiction Association Best Novel in 1998, and the Arthur C. Clarke Prize for Best Novel in 1998. The Sparrow is her first novel. And the accolades are spectacular because, and I honestly think it deserves it after reading it. Russell was raised Catholic, and she left the Catholic Church at the age of 15. And interestingly, as she was writing The Sparrow and the sequel book, Children of God, she converted to Judaism. So, quick fact about her. The summary of The Sparrow, again, it's a science fiction novel. It tells the story of an 8-member party which is sent out into space by the Jesuit Society of Jesus to locate and find another civilization that they discovered based on picking up radio waves of music from the Arecibo telescope in Puerto Rico. Our main protagonist is Emilio Santos. He is a Jesuit priest and a linguist. He is the local priest at the Arecibo. I'm gonna say it's Arecibo. I wish I looked into that beforehand, but I didn't. Bad booktuber again. So Emilio Santos is the local priest. He is also a linguist, and so he's been transferred around the world many, many times by the Society of Jesus, clearly to do mission work, to interact with local communities, to pick up the languages and the cultures, and so the two parties can talk to each other and to gain better understanding of each other. So Emilio Santos is friends with Jimmy Quinn, who is the telescope's astronomer. And simply on some late night shift one night, Jimmy Quinn discovers radio waves that seem to be transmitting music. He instead of calling his employers, who is the corporation that runs the telescope, he calls Emilio Santos, his other friends, George and Ann Edwards, and Sophia Mendez. Now, Sophia is a Turkish Jewish woman who is an AI specialist, artificial intelligence. Ann Edwards is a medical doctor, and George, her husband, is an engineer. And they are all friends. They're all kind of a motley family that they kind of gravitated towards each other. So those are the people that Jimmy calls to just let them know of this massive discovery. So they all decide amongst themselves that they should launch an exploration into space to discover this other civilization somewhere around Alpha Centauri. They want to find this planet and this other group of, you can't say people because you don't know what you would discover, of alien life or extraterrestrial life. So it's interesting that this is a priest and a doctor, an engineer, an astronomer, and an AI specialist. It's not NASA, it's not the military, it's nobody. They eventually do get connected to the corporation that runs the telescope, and the employer of Sofia Mendez, because they need resources. So eventually, Emilio is speaking with his employer, who is the Society of Jesus. They all decide, all of the upper-ups decide that there is going to be an exploratory party to this planet, and they want to find it. They want to find the source of the radio transmissions and the music. So Emilio Sandez is the Jesuit priest who is our protagonist. He's on the ship. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to tell you what kind of ship it is. Sofia Mendez is the AI specialist. Jimmy Quinn is the astronomer. Ann Edwards is a medical doctor. George Edwards is an engineer. And there are 3 additional people who are all Jesuit priests. So on this one ship, there are 8 people. 4 of them are Jesuit priests. Mark Robichaud is a biologist and an artist. Alan Pace is a musician and a priest. Mark is also a priest. And D.W. Yarborough, who is the leader of this band of motley crew, and he's a pilot and a Jesuit priest. Now, the Sparrow is labeled as a science fiction novel. It's not just science fiction. There are some very deep, heavy themes in this book of science and religion and theology and morality, good and evil. I think one of the main themes, and it depends on the reader which theme you're going to think is the main theme throughout the book, but one of them is the classic question of good versus evil. And does God cause evil, or does he allow it? What part does God have in the evil of humanity and the evil that is perpetrated on the earth? And one of the great questions that many atheists or agnostics or people who are seeking answers ask of Christians is, if God was loving and God was all good, why does he let evil happen? If God is good, why is there evil in the world? Why do people starve? Why do people die in wars? Why is there so much crime and violence perpetrated against each other? Why are people living in poverty? There's so many questions surrounding why do these awful things happen to good people? Why do people suffer? What's the answer to suffering if there is a God? And so that is a very strong theme that goes throughout the book. And even Emilio Sandez, our main protagonist priest, he's constantly in mental exploration on that question. Am I enough? Is God with me? Am I really approved by God to go forward and take part in this mission? What's the meaning of me? What's the meaning of me being here on the earth? What's my purpose? Am I able to take part in this? Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? Am I whatever? And he feels almost as if God doesn't approve of him or like him. He feels that how could God possibly choose him to be a part of this? And it's so torturous to listen to his inner thoughts and to realize that many of us with faith, with Christian faith, think the same thing quite often. Am I good enough for God? Should I go walk into a church building because I have so much stuff and crap and baggage in my life? I'm no good to anybody. I can't go to church. I'm whatever. My faith isn't strong enough. I don't pray enough. I have too many doubts and questions. And there's a lot of that runs throughout the book, especially with Emilio, which strikes me as so interesting because he is a priest and he's been through the process, the education, the training to be a priest in perpetuity, a priest forever. And he fully expects to die a priest, and he's constantly seeking out and trying to discover God in his life and God's purpose for him. And so there's so many of those very heavy themes, and there's those individual themes of what's God's purpose for me, and then there's the global theme of, if there is a loving God, why do people suffer? The book is from the point of view of a Jesuit group, so the theology is very Catholic in nature. Russell actually did say in an interview that even though the group is called the Society of Jesus, she's not talking about Jesus Christ, and she's not talking about the incarnation, because she's talking about a group of Catholic priests from the perspective of a Jewish author. And so it's not evangelistic in nature. It's more of the question of suffering, guilt, trials, and purpose. There's a lot. It's a first contact narrative, so it very, very heavy Star Trek vibes for me reading the book. These people want to go out and find a civilization that nobody's discovered before. Emilio wants to discover the full reach of God. Is God in there? Is God going to sanction this mission? And it's almost an example of globalization and colonization, if you look at it that way. And I started to think that, I started to feel a little bit anxious that it could become that. It could become a question of, can we colonize another planet? Can we take over another group's existence? Can we improve on it? Can we make it good for us? Is the presence of God there, or can I evangelize in an alien civilization to show them the love of God? All of those questions run through the novel. And when you listen to Emilio and his thoughts, there's a lot of deep characterization that Russell uses, which is superb. And you can read his thoughts, and you can read the conversations that he has, not just with other priests, but with his friends and with Anne Edwards. And it's very poignant. Even though he is the priest that he still is questioning God almost on a daily basis. He still is looking for answers. And the thing about questioning God, if you are a believer in God, is you get to do that, because that's what a relationship with God is. When we talk about the question of evil and suffering, we also talk about God's omnipotence, his power. Is he simply ignoring when people suffer? Is he causing people to suffer? Is he allowing people to suffer? Or does he have no power to affect it, to affect change? And it depends on, sometimes it depends on which Christian theology you believe, which Christian denomination you were raised in. There's many different answers depending on, often on which denominations and or Catholicism versus Protestant. Where does Judaism come into the conversation? What about Eastern religions? How does all of that fit into this conversation of God's power? When we talk about the omnipotence of God, and we think about this mission that these 8 people went on, it all started from Emilio Sandoz, who is a priest, not a scientist and not an astronomer. He's the one that suggested, hey, maybe we could fly a ship to find this new planet and this new civilization and find out where this beautiful music is coming from. And it was kind of a laughable comment, but somebody jumped on it like, you know what, we could. Let's call this and let's do that. And Sophia Mendez, who is the AI specialist, is employed by the corporation that runs the telescope, and she has contacts of people that she can find actual pieces and parts to put a ship together to travel into space. And Sandoz is the one who contacts the Society of Jesus, and he's giving them updates and reports. Jimmy Quinn is the astronomer. It all starts putting it into motion. And then Anne and George Edwards get involved. Anne is extremely skeptical. She doesn't want anybody to go into space. She can't believe that there's a possibility of another civilization that can be discovered. She's like, whoa, wait a minute. We're putting the brakes on here. And they introduce a cliche into the book that D.W. Yarborough, who ends up being the leader of the mission, talks about turtles on a fence post. Turtles can't climb up onto a fence post and lay down on their shell. Somebody had to have put them there. So is it coincidence, or is it turtles on a fence post? And throughout the novel, Emilio keeps questioning, is this God ordained, or is this something that we're just forcing, we're going to do this? And according to the way everything plays out, it seems coincidence, but he's ascribing it to turtles on a fence post. God is approving every step of their way. So as much struggle as he goes through and puts himself through is do I deserve this? Am I good enough for this? Is God sanctioning me? They end up flying into outer space. there's an enormous discussion on celibacy. Now, we're not surprised by that because these are Catholic priests and they're mandated to be celibate for life. But it's an interesting, Russell brings this up, like, do we really need to get into this conversation? Because we all know that priests are celibate. We all know that Catholic priests are celibate. What's the deal? What's the conversation? It's going to become more important when you listen and read Emilio's conversations with Anne and conversations with other priests. What's the big deal with the celibacy conversation? It's more than just celibacy, it's actually sexuality. He's thinking about his own personal sexual existence. And as much as I wanted to kind of like just skim through those conversations in those sections, I finally realized towards the end of the book why that was more of a landmark conversational topic. So keep that in mind if you read the book. There's, again, without getting into detail towards the conclusion, the end of the book, there's a theme of sacrifice and there's a theme of innocence. And as much as Mary Doria Russell was Catholic and left the Church at 15, converted to Judaism, there is a lot of thematic crossover to Jesus and to the sacrifice of an innocent and the sacrifice of the lamb. There's a lot of talk of blood. And you could correlate that into the theology of the incarnation and the sacrifice and the crucifixion of Jesus. That's all I can say. It's if you are a Christian, you'll recognize it once you get to past a certain point of the book. It's very easy to have pat answers to questions of, if there's a God, why is there suffering? If there's a God, why is there evil? How far does God's power extend? Does it extend onto just Earth? Did he create just Earth? Or does it extend into other alien planets, extraterrestrials? So those are conversations throughout the book. How can there be the type of suffering on the Earth? And Emilio, at the beginning of the book, he is a faithful priest. He has questions of God. He is human. He makes mistakes. When they finish their mission in the ship and they end up landing on a planet, he is described as a saint. And in the transfer in the book, when it goes from the 2019 to 2060 and it moves back in time, he reacts with disgust at being called a saint when they landed during their mission. So we find out later on why he's reacting that way. There's so much exploration of his state of mind and the way he feels he is vile and was never approved by God. He doesn't deserve God's love, and he is nobody with any ability or purpose to bring the word or the love of God to any other civilization, any other society. The book is very difficult to read because there is definitely an explosive conclusion, and there's so much to think about when it comes to what part does God have in suffering in the existence of us on the earth. Is he a daily part of our lives and what happens to us? Is he watching us kind of like on TV with a bowl of popcorn? Or does he have a hand in everything that we do and think and choose? And does he have a hand in our actions and the actions of others around us? What part does he play? And I think that's one of the biggest themes throughout the novel. And we can clearly identify evil throughout the story, especially once we get to the end, because it concludes in a way where it turns the story. Emilio Sandoz is put out in the beginning as a criminal. He's a survivor, but he came back an absolute physical and emotional wreck. So he's on trial, and we listen to their thoughts, the other priests' thoughts, about what they think of him and what he's thinking of himself. But the more we go back and the more we read the story and we apply it to what we already read about him further in the beginning, our views of him start to change, and we've misidentified evil, and we start to re-identify it as we get through the book. And we also get to see his mental process of how he feels about God from the future to the past, from the future of 2060 and him sitting in front of a panel of priests, to when he goes back in time and he thinks about the past, and he's basically relating the facts to them. And so we read his mind shift, and we read his emotions and how he recovers, and what he has to go through in order to do that. The writing style, I don't know how she did this, but being a first novel, her character development is incredible. I was just mesmerized when she's giving me background of every character. We learn their lives, their thoughts, their motivations. It's seamless and it's smooth, and we see the connections as to why that character is dropped into the story and the time and the place that they're dropped into. We understand how they got to the point in their lives where they're about to enter a ship to fly into outer space. And it's so interesting and smooth the way that she characterizes them, and the connections that she makes between one character and the next. The build-ups and the growth and the development of each character is amazing. Her writing style is very fluid and smooth. I wouldn't say there's anything extraordinarily poetic about it, but that's okay. There doesn't have to be. What she did do is excellence, and I absolutely love the novel. I would love to know if there's anybody else out there that has read it that would like to reread it with me in a buddy read, because I would love to be able to talk about it with somebody and to tab it and write notes and highlights. I would love to be able to do that. So if you're watching and you're interested in that, please let me know. I would love to do a reread. I am very quickly going to pick up the sequel to The Sparrow, Children of God, which was published 1998, I believe, 2 years after The Sparrow. Now, and one of the fun things that I always do when I start a book is try to determine where the title came from. And the title is biblical, and you realize it towards the end of the book. There is a passage in scripture that talks about God's relationship to the sparrow. And it's very interesting and applicable to the book. So I think that's it. I wish that I could say more, but I don't want to spoil it for anybody. I have to say, give the disclaimer for trigger warnings. There's trigger warnings all over the place. It's a very difficult story to read. There's some pretty grim, gruesome parts in the novel. Be aware of that if you're interested in reading it. It's an amazing book for discussion. Science fiction, theology, morality, the state of the world, alien life, extraterrestrials, globalization, colonization. I mean, there's so much to talk about. And I was actually surprised and impressed at how timeless the book seemed to be. So that's it for today. I absolutely love this novel. I hope some of you may pick it up based on my review. Like I said, if you're interested in doing it as a buddy read, I would love to reread it. I would prefer to read it with someone who's already read it, so we can discuss things that would become much more clear on a second time around. So hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you again soon in the next video, and have a good night.